All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 111. And today, I got something in my eye, and it's annoying the hell out of me. I'm going to try to do this video anyways, but holy crap, does it hurt. All right. So, today, there have been, there's currently two somewhat ongoing antitrust lawsuits that could very much change how definitely this website works, but how the internet works just in general. And I know there's a fair amount of people that may not quite understand exactly, first of all, what's going on, and second of all, why it's such a big deal. So, for anyone that is out of the loop, for a few years now, and by a few, I mean like half a decade at least, the government has been looking at both Alphabet and Meta. Alphabet is the parent company of Google. And Meta is the parent company of Facebook. And so they've been looking at those two mega corporations for over a decade, to be honest. But the actual litigation and stuff started happening within the past like 4 to 5 years. And basically accusing them of being monopolies and using their monopolistic power to prevent competition. And recently, as in the last couple days here, a court has found that Google does own an illegal monopoly, and they are currently going through a trial to figure out what the remedy of that is going to be. Whereas with Meta, I don't know if there's been an actual finding yet, but, and this is the thing about court cases just in general, because there was a fact finding, or because there was a judgment made in the Alphabet case, there's a very, very good chance that unless the Alphabet case is overturned on appeal, that's going to be all that the Meta case needs to also be found guilty of having a monopoly. But the interesting thing is, despite the fact that both of them are being brought up on what are called antitrust lawsuits, they're actually very different in how what they've been accused of and exactly how they've kind of wielded their monopolistic power. And a lot of it actually harkens back to a court case in 98-99, which is officially called the United States versus Microsoft Corporation. But it really did kind of set the stage for what modern antitrust lawsuits look like in the digital age. So let's go back to the 90s. Get your slap bracelet, go get some Ecto Cooler, and check this out. Throughout actually the majority of the 90s, the government kept trying to bring charges against Microsoft, because as early as I think it was 1985, Microsoft was one of the most profitable and valuable software companies in the world. They were doing amazing things. Their DOS operating system was second to none. And then they started coming out with the Windows operating system, which really changed the world. If you've never actually worked in DOS, the first computer that I ever used, when I was very, very young, actually ran on DOS. So I learned how to navigate DOS before I learned Windows. But the thing about Windows was a graphical user interface. You didn't have just a line of code that you had to memorize. You had a mouse pointer, and you could actually interact with things in there visually. And it was this huge thing. And then you had Windows 95 and Windows 98. But that actually wasn't the thing that eventually got a finding against Microsoft. The thing that finally tripped up Microsoft was actually Internet Explorer. Now, if you are very, very young on the interwebs, you may not know what Internet Explorer is. Well, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, when you wanted to get on the internet, you would click on a magical blue E and would open up Internet Explorer, which used to be the web browser that was packaged in with Windows. And that was actually the issue that actually got the finding against them, was the fact that Internet Explorer was actually not just packaged in to Windows, but Microsoft actually had contracts with various computer manufacturers and chip manufacturers like Intel that required them to not only put Microsoft on any computers that they built, but also, or Windows on any computer that they built, but also they were required to put on Internet Explorer and not allowed to put on competing software like Netscape Navigator. If you don't know what that is, it's another software that used to exist and doesn't anymore. And that was actually kind of the big point of the lawsuit. Was the whole point of antitrust laws go back to a piece of legislation called the Sherman Antitrust Act. It was signed in the late 1800s. And basically, the idea behind antitrust laws is eventually a company can get large enough that it can't really be competed with, and because they have really a huge share of the market, they actually have the ability to do things like buy competitors, or through negotiations and the things like that, ensure that competitors are never given the ability to actually compete with them. So that's where the Sherman Antitrust Act came from. And the entire purpose behind it was to ensure that if a company ever did get big enough, that they wouldn't use their power and market share to prevent competitors from showing up. Because the basics of a capitalist economy is the idea that competition is always good for the consumer, because either competition lowers prices or increases quality. Competition is always good. So when a company is looked at about whether they have a monopoly, they look at a couple different things. One is they look at their market share. They look at how much of the market do they control. And then the second thing that they look at is, because of that market share, what actions have they taken that have prevented competition? And that's where Microsoft kind of screwed up. Because they were able to prove in court that Microsoft didn't just kind of bundle Internet Explorer with Windows. They actually went out of their way to prevent computer manufacturers and a bunch of other companies from installing programs that would compete with their Windows suite of programs. Now, Microsoft tried to argue that Internet Explorer was just a feature of Windows. It wasn't a completely separate program, and that was shot down in court by the fact that you could install Internet Explorer on a Mac. And they go, no, if it can exist without Windows, then it's not a feature of Windows. It's its own program. And they did eventually find against Microsoft. And one of the big reasons that they found against Microsoft that would actually show up later in the appeal was the fact that every time that Microsoft staff were deposed and gave testimony, they basically lied through their teeth over and over and over again. There are still videos that you can find on the internet of Bill Gates' deposition for that case. And he would do things like they would go, so what exactly was the agreement that you had here? Trying to show that, yeah, I put this agreement in to make sure that you couldn't install Netscape Navigator on a computer. He would go, well, what's an agreement? How do you define an agreement? And what do you mean by what? Like, just the most incredibly pedantic, evasive answers he could possibly give to try and weasel his way out. So what happens is the finding they are found to have not only an illegal monopoly, but that they have used their monopolistic power to stifle competition. And that's the really important part. And that's what is one of the issues with Google right now. Microsoft obviously appealed it, and part of the decision was actually overturned. But it wasn't overturned on the facts. It was overturned because one of the, the judge in that case, Judge Jackson, was found to have, and I'm going to read directly from the Wikipedia page, Jackson had improperly discussed the case with the news media while it was still in progress, violating the code of conduct for American judges. So it wasn't that the finding itself was wrong. It was the fact that Jackson had an interview while he was overseeing the case, which made it seem that he was no longer an impartial judge. If you look at modern politics, you'll notice that idea has been thrown out the window, with judges regularly talking about cases that they're currently trying, depending on who's being tried. But this is a big deal. However, in the same ruling, and again, reading directly from the Wikipedia page, Microsoft executives had, according to him, proved time and time again to be inaccurate, misleading, evasive, and transparently false. Microsoft is a company with institutional disdain for both the truth and for rules of law that lesser entities must respect. It is also a company whose senior management is not averse to offering specious testimony to support spurious defenses to claims of its wrongdoings. Basically, he said 100%, not only are you guys guilty, but you guys have lied in court repeatedly. You are horrible, disgusting people. However, what Judge Jackson did violates the code of conduct for American judges, and we can't have that. So what we're going to do, we're going to remand it back to a lower court. So it was appealed and the judgment was overturned, but they didn't say, no, you got it wrong. It was basically, this guy screwed up. We have to give it to a different judge so that we don't have the perceived bias. However, you guys are 100% right. And so because Microsoft knew that they were screwed, instead of going to trial, they reached a settlement that they basically said, okay, we won't threaten companies with not allowing them to use Windows unless they only put our programs on there. And see, that's the thing that's really important here, because settlements are not, settlements do not create precedent. And precedent is basically once a judgment has been made and it has been appealed and approved after the appeal, that creates what's called legal precedent. And that means in another case that's kind of similar, instead of having to prove the same thing over, they can go, actually, all we have to do is say, hey, look, in this case, they did this. In our case, they did the same thing. And this is what that other judge said. So this is what you have to say because the precedent has been set. And so it basically, that's how our common law system works. Not all laws in the U.S. are actually written by Congress and signed into law by the president or the governor or whatever executive branch body oversees that particular jurisdiction. A lot of our laws come from what's called common law and precedent. A judge makes a ruling, it's eventually appealed, and during the appeal process, the appeals court approves the ruling as well. That's when it becomes precedent. Technically, it kind of becomes precedent as soon as the judge makes the ruling. But my very, very basic understanding, and again, I am not a lawyer, I've never practiced law, this is just my understanding, is it doesn't really become precedent founding until it's been appealed and then approved after the appeal. So anyway, because the Microsoft ruling, they settled out of court instead of actually going back and retrying and making the same finding at the end. That doesn't technically set precedent, which is really smart on Microsoft's part, because once it becomes precedent, then it can be used to try other cases, and it would have been really, really bad for Microsoft. Microsoft, more likely than not, would not exist the way that it does now if it hadn't settled out of court. So fast forward to specifically the Alphabet antitrust. One of the things that they claim in this court, that again the judge has found is true, is that Google was illegally forcing through contracts and things like that, forcing certain manufacturers to install the Chrome browser on things like phones and other stuff like that, which is literally the exact same thing that Microsoft was doing in the 90s that got that in trouble. So why did it have to go to court and all this stuff? Because again, it didn't actually get ruled in the 90s. It was taken care of out of court. So now there's actually going to be a ruling. In addition to the Chrome browser thing, I believe that they also found that the Google AdSense has an illegal monopoly on basically ads on the internet. If you go to any website at all that runs ads, there is a really, really good chance, like 70 or 80% of those ads on all the websites on the internet are bought and paid for through Google AdSense. It is by far the number one ad platform in the world. And so again, having a monopoly is generally not enough to get a Sherman antitrust lawsuit against you. They also have to prove that you've used that monopolistic power to some way harm consumers, either by crushing competition or, in this particular case, there's a bunch of different accusations that they've made, that they've mentioned that they've crushed competition. They've also made mention that they've used it to illegally censor certain individuals that they didn't like and things like that. I did not go through the entirety of the court case because it's very, very dry and I am not a lawyer. But the basic finding that happened was, the AdSense and Chrome browsers and the Android operating system, Alphabet owns way too much, and they're using it to prevent competition. So what's the solution? Well, that's actually what's on trial right now. Like, the finding has already come out. Yes, this is what it is. And right now, Google is, or Alphabet, is trying to do everything that they can to prevent uh, the judge from saying no. You have to break up the company. Which what that effectively means is Google AdSense doesn't go away. Neither does YouTube, neither does Chrome or anything like that. However, it forces them to become separate companies with separate CEOs and separate board of directors and all that stuff. They're not allowed to be the same company. Now, one of the first thoughts that kind of came to my head was, well, why does that matter? You know, just because they're separate companies doesn't mean they can't work together and do the exact same thing. Well, actually, it does. If a single company works towards its best interest, that's normal. If multiple unrelated companies are all working together, that becomes another violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, and that is a significantly lower bar to reach in a court case. All you have to do is show that the companies are collaborating in a way to prevent competition, and generally it's just that you have to show that they're collaborating. So that is one of the solutions that's being kind of tossed around right now is, well, we just break up the company. So what would that mean for like YouTube and stuff like that? I haven't the foggiest idea, to be perfectly honest. YouTube existed before it was purchased by Google, but the majority of the time that Google has existed, and especially since Google has been paying its creators, it has been YouTube. YouTube has been a part of Google for the majority of the time that's been happening. And so if something like this happens, I'm not exactly certain what happens to YouTube. I've seen kind of alarmist articles talk about the fact that if Chrome in and of itself is forced to be its own company, then it will just implode because it can't survive on its own because it doesn't make enough money. That may be true. See, that's the thing about a company like Meta owning, or not Meta, Alphabet owning so many different things, is you can have things like Chrome itself is free, and there's not a ton of advertising built into Chrome itself. Basically, the advertising is on the web pages. But because Google owns both Chrome and also owns the AdSense, it can use Chrome to funnel people towards the ads that does make it money. So in that aspect, Chrome does make money. If you take that away to where it no longer can make money off of a separate company, well, then Chrome has to find a way to make money itself. And my current understanding of how Chrome works is it's just not designed to be monetized that way. The way that Chrome makes money for Google is by interacting with AdSense, because Google owns all of them. So that could be something that happens. It might not be. There are significantly other ways to do that. Again, Chrome is not the only browser in the world. There's the Opera browser that is becoming significantly more popular. There's Firefox, which used to be really good and now is just kind of been set on fire. Forget the Fox. So it's not that it's impossible for a web browser to exist without kind of a completely separate way to make money. That's just not how Chrome operates currently, as far as I understand it. And again, this is coming from someone with a degree in business management, specifically in marketing, not in programming or any sort of digital anything. So there's always a possibility I could have this wrong. So that's what's happening to Google, and Google is doing everything it can to try and prevent the breakup, because it will it will massively affect how Google runs everything. If it can no longer kind of double dip through YouTube and AdSense, well, then there's a chance that YouTube is going to change rather drastically because it can't just ride off the tails of AdSense making, let's be perfectly honest here, absolute shit tons of money. It's not that, Google is, oh no, if we can't stay together, then the company will go bankrupt. No, they're a multi-billion-dollar company. They got plenty of money. But it's definitely something that could affect YouTube. It could affect Chrome. It could affect most of the internet because, again, most of the internet uses Google AdSense to be able to make money off of ads. So that in and of itself is really, really big deal. Now, on the other side, we have the Meta lawsuit, which is another one that's been going on for a long time. But, first of all, Meta doesn't have their own browser. So they're not actually being accused of the same thing that Google was. Google, again, the accusation was literally almost identical to the accusation that was levied at Microsoft in the 90s. You guys are using contracts and things like that to illegally enrich yourself and get rid of competitors, specifically to your Chrome browser and to your AdSense program. Your contracts require them to use these two things. Meta, on the other hand, is basically being accused of using its very, very large presence on the internet 10 years ago. When Facebook was the number one website in the world. I actually don't know if it was ever the number one website in the world, but back in like 2010-ish, Facebook was everywhere. Everybody had a Facebook. It was the biggest thing. And Facebook was making Zuckerberg specifically just tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of money. And so they used that to buy WhatsApp. They used it to buy Instagram. And basically what happened and what the kind of allegations against Meta and Facebook are is that instead of innovating and attempting to compete with different things, because what Instagram does is different than what Facebook does, and what WhatsApp does is different than what Facebook does. But Facebook did have, Facebook had picture sharing capabilities like Instagram, but Instagram did it a shit ton better and did it in very, very different ways. So instead of trying to compete with Instagram, they just bought it. The same thing with WhatsApp. They have messaging features in Facebook, but they kind of suck. And so they went out and they just purchased WhatsApp. And that's kind of the allegations, as far as I can understand, against Meta, is basically you are so big and you have so much money that anytime somebody gets close to challenging you, either you buy them and shut them down, or you kind of position yourself to compete with them by buying a competitor of the person competing with you, and then just filling them full of money so that this other company just can't exist. Again, if the Alphabet lawsuit actually goes, or the trial to figure out what the solutions to the finding are, actually goes through with breaking up Alphabet into various different parts, there's a very good chance that ruling is going to be used in the same way against Meta, despite the fact that they are accused of violating the Sherman Antitrust Act in different ways. The solution is probably going to be very, very similar. The reason why neither one of them has had this done yet is, again, the only other case that could have set precedent in this matter never had a chance to set a precedent because it was settled out of court. And the only reason it was allowed to settle out of court was because it was appealed and then overturned, again, only because the judge on the case had an interview while he was a judge on the case, and he talked about the case in that interview. I sincerely doubt if that were to happen in an hour. It has happened now, and nothing has happened. So the only way that Alphabet could come up with a way to not have to follow through with whatever the decision is going to be, is they would have to find a way to appeal it, get it remanded back to a lower court, and then settle before it goes to trial again. Because a lot of the solutions that they're talking about for Google and Alphabet right now were the same solutions that they were planning on imposing on Microsoft in the 90s. But again, they were able to get it overturned, and then this settlement route didn't require them to divest themselves from making internet browsers. And from what I was able to read, effectively what they wanted to do is they wanted to chop up Microsoft into a bunch of different companies, where you'd have one company that was just Windows, and then another company that made internet browsers, and then the Microsoft Office suite would have been their own company. And that would have changed the entirety of the landscape of computers moving forward. Like, if they hadn't gotten the settlement, computers as we know them would not work the way that they do now. I'm not saying it would be better or worse. I'm saying it would be different. And the same thing is going to happen with this whole Google Alphabet lawsuit. No matter what happens, unless somehow they're able to overturn the decision and find a way to not allow a precedent to be set, this is going to massively change how the internet works. Because whether or not you like YouTube or use Google Chrome, you do regularly visit websites that use Google AdSense. And if that gets kind of partnered off into its own company, everything changes. You know, AdSense is able to sell ads the way it does because Chrome is able to collect user data, and YouTube is able to collect user data, and all these other things. And so AdSense is able to hyper target ads. When those companies are no longer the same company, it will be illegal for them to share that information freely. So either AdSense will have to start buying that information from Chrome and from YouTube and anything else that they break up, or they will have to come up with their own way to figure out that marketing, which requires doing market research, which is very, very expensive, but it's worth it. Right now, Google has all the market research that they need, and then they feed that market research back into their AdSense team, which just makes it so they're effectively printing money all the time. They have effectively what's referred to as, I've heard it referred to a lot of things. I've always just called it a lateral monopoly. There's two different versions of monopolies. You have a vertical monopoly, and that's basically where you control, you create something and you actually control everything from the beginning of its creation as raw materials all the way through the production process and the sales process. So, you know, if you made screws, let's just say, a vertical monopoly would be owning, you know, iron ore mines and smelting factories, and then the factories that actually make the screws, and then also owning the stores that the screws are sold at. That's what's considered a vertical monopoly. A lateral monopoly is where you have a single market that you have just kind of owned every aspect of this whole market. So it's lateral as opposed to vertical. And that's effectively what Google has been accused of, and technically found to be in violation of, is having a lateral monopoly of the internet. So like I said, this is really, really big news. I don't think there is anyone that doesn't think that Google is doing something kind of sketchy. Whether or not you think it goes up to the level of illegal, well, again, that's what courts are here to decide. It's not our job to decide any of that. But it is very, very fascinating, and at 100% will change how everything works. I'm actually kind of surprised that Google let it go this far. In general, and you see this a lot in the music industry, when a company gets close to losing a lawsuit, they will immediately settle out of court. And a lot of times the reason that they're able to do that is they will give whatever the opposing party wants, they will give them everything that they want and then some. And so the opposing party is like, well, why waste the hundreds of thousands of dollars to actually make it all the way through this trial or make it to the trial? We can get everything we want and not have to do anything about it. So a lot of times in like copyright laws, when a copyright case is getting close to actually going to trial, somebody will settle because they don't want a precedent set. As soon as that precedent is set and it's affirmed on appeal, that is now law. It carries almost the same weight as if Congress had actually created a bill, passed it through both houses of Congress, put it on the president's desk, and he had signed it himself. They don't want that because as long as there is no ruling, they can use their size and their power in the market to basically kind of bully people out of the idea of taking them to court because it's very, very expensive. And even if somebody wins, there's no guarantee that the party is going to be able to recover their costs. So they might just be pissing money away. To me, I find it kind of interesting that it actually got to the point where a finding was made against Alphabet. My theory is either Alphabet thought that they were just, the too big to fail kind of thing. They were just so powerful that there was nothing that they could do. Or the prosecutors decided that no, we're going to effectively make an example of you. We're never going to offer you a settlement. We're not going to accept any settlement that you make. We want precedent set. So just because, again, they learned from what happened with Microsoft, because again, Microsoft went, they settled, they got just about everything that they wanted, and then Microsoft continued to do kind of skeezy things for the next 26 years. Microsoft is still doing kind of stuff. Microsoft learned well enough to kind of be careful about how they do it. So they're kind of flirting with the line now, as opposed to just blatantly stepping over it like they were doing in the 90s. And Google basically had done the exact same thing. They had decided they were so powerful that they could just do whatever they wanted and nobody could stop them because they were just that big. And somebody did. Now, again, currently, they're still on trial. The finding has been, yes, you have an illegal monopoly, but there hasn't been a solution decided. And that's actually what the current trial is doing, is they're trying to come up with, okay, we don't want to just nuke these companies out of existence because that will hurt consumers a lot more than it's going to hurt Google. It's not going to be good for Google. But could you imagine if like 80 or 90% of the websites that exist out there instantly had their funding turned off? Like, that would basically tank the entirety of the internet. So they're trying to come up with the best way to deal with this. We're going to find out in the next few weeks here. We're going to find out what the proposed solution is. Now, we'll guarantee after the settlement after the decision is reached as to what to do, Alphabet is 100% going to appeal it. And that's going to take time. So it's not like, by June, we're going to have a brand new internet. No, this is going to go on for a long time. Like the actual trial where all this stuff happened, where all of the information came out, happened last September. So that's when the actual trial happened. The finding that they had an illegal monopoly just happened this past few days. So we're talking what? January, February, March. So we're talking 6 months later. And the only thing they had to do was decide yes or no. Obviously, it's significantly more complicated than that, but it was a single question. This new part is not just did they do it or didn't they do it. It is what is the best way to fix this problem, and that's going to be complicated. So don't think that, oh, in a couple weeks, everything's going to... No, this will drag on for months, possibly years. But the fact that it has been ruled is a really, really big deal. And in a few years, we are going to see a very, very different internet. Whether that's a better internet or a worse internet, we will find out. But it is going to mean that once this massive mega corporation is chopped up into tinier pieces, it's going to give the opportunity for competitors to actually compete. And so it may be that AdSense shrinks its share of the market significantly because it gets a bunch of different competitors. It could also mean that AdSense just becomes a significantly more consumer-friendly platform as well. Like, there's a lot of different ways this could go. But it is something that's going to affect this channel. It's going to affect every single channel on YouTube. It's going to affect almost the entirety of the internet, no matter what happens. The die has been cast. Things have been set in motion that changes are coming. Whether those are good changes or bad changes, we will find out in a few years. But this is history changing. Again, the lawsuit against Microsoft was massive at the time. It really, really was. And again, if it had gone a different way, the internet as we know it would not exist. Computers as we know them would not exist. Not saying they'd be better or worse, they just would be different. So, yeah. Fascinating stuff from the biggest world. Interested to hear from you guys. First of all, were you aware of any of this stuff was happening? Have you been following it at all? Second of all, what are your opinions? Do you think this particular administration is being a little bit too hard on Google for obvious reasons? I will point out that this trial and everything has been going on longer than this administration has been in power. Again, the actual trial took place over a month before the election that got the current administration into power. So this is not exclusively, current administration's doing this. However, I know a lot of people see this as kind of a vendetta from one person to another. So, like I said, interested to hear from you guys. What do you guys think? Is this something that you'd like me to follow a little bit more closely? Or is this enough? You're just like, no, go back to like D&D stuff or SS20 stuff. Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, it's all for me today. I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.